My entire identity was built around climbing higher and earning more money. When I suddenly chose to stop, the reactions from people around me shocked me completely. Every raise, every title, every meeting invite that included the words leadership opportunity made me feel like I was moving up, like I was finally becoming somebody. And people loved that version of me. They said I was focused, driven. They liked the way I talked about Q4 projections like I actually cared. They liked the late nights, the missed birthdays, the constant sorry, I'm swamped. It looked like dedication from the outside. But they never saw the panic attacks in my car before walking into work, or how I kept a change of dress shirts in my trunk for when I sweat through the first one by 10 a.m. They just saw the momentum. And for a long time, that was enough for me. My name is Jason, 37 years old. Lived in Chicago most of my life. I used to work in commercial finance for a mid-sized firm. By 31, I had moved up to regional director. By 34, I was gunning for VP. I had the condo with the skyline view, a car with heated seats I barely used, and enough Marriott points to flee the country if I ever decided to snap. Thing is, I did not come from money. My dad was a mechanic. My mom did hair out of our kitchen until her wrists gave out. Growing up, success meant having health insurance that actually worked and a fridge full of food that did not expire while we waited for the next paycheck. So yeah, once I made it into those boardrooms, I clung to that chair like my life depended on it. Because part of me thought it did. Every time I got promoted, people clapped a little louder. My mom bragged more. Old classmates slid into my messages, suddenly friendly again. My LinkedIn profile read like a trophy case, and I let it define me. I let it tell me I mattered. And for a while, I believed it. But all of that, every shiny piece of it, started to crack one afternoon in April. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because I had just wrapped a call with the East Coast office about Q1 overages, and I had a meeting scheduled with HR right after. I walked into the break room to grab a quick coffee, and I saw Marcus, the guy who started 2 years after me, get pulled aside by the SVP. A handshake, a smile, that quiet, loaded nod. I knew that nod. I had seen it in the mirror the day I got bumped to senior associate. They were promoting him. And the weird part? I did not feel jealous. I felt nothing. Not happiness for him. Not bitterness for me. Just empty. That was the first crack. Tiny, quiet, easy to ignore. Until it wasn't. Because what happened next? That shook the whole foundation. The scary thing about momentum is how quiet it gets once it is just normal. I did not wake up one day obsessed with promotions. It crept in slowly. One good performance review turned into two. Two turned into expectations. Expectations turned into pressure. And pressure turned into identity. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being Jason the guy and became Jason the upward trajectory. At first, ambition felt necessary. I told myself it was about security. About never ending up like my parents, counting change at the grocery store, or pretending we were not worried when the car made a new noise. I told myself more money meant more safety, more freedom, more options. But if I am honest, it was also about proving something. To old classmates who laughed when I worked retail in my 20s. To relatives who asked when I was going to get a real job. To myself, mostly. Work became the easiest place to win. You show up early. You stay late. You say yes when everyone else hesitates. You answer emails on weekends. You take the call during dinner. People notice. You get rewarded. It is clean. It is measurable. And nobody questions it because the culture worships that kind of sacrifice. My days followed a script. Wake up before the sun. Check email in bed. Scroll through Slack while brushing my teeth. Coffee, protein bar, commute. Meetings stacked on meetings stacked on meetings. Lunch at my desk or not at all. More coffee. More numbers. More pressure. Then home late. Brain buzzing. Too tired to enjoy anything, but too wired to sleep. I told myself this was temporary. Just one more push. One more title. One more bonus cycle. Then I would slow down. Except the finish line kept moving. The people around me fed into it without realizing it. My mom loved telling her friends what I did for a living. Friends introduced me as the successful one. Dates leaned in when I mentioned my role. Even strangers treated me differently once they heard where I worked. That external validation is addictive. It fills gaps you do not want to look at too closely. But cracks kept forming. I forgot my sister's birthday 2 years in a row. Missed my best friend's engagement party because of a can't-miss client dinner I barely remembered afterward. I stopped going to the gym, stopped cooking, stopped calling people back. Everything outside work became background noise. The real warning sign came one night when I finally had a free evening. No meetings, no calls, no fires to put out. I sat on my couch, staring at the TV, remote in hand, and felt completely lost. I could not decide what to watch, could not focus on anything. My chest felt tight, like I was late for something even though there was nowhere to be. That was when it hit me. I did not know how to exist without momentum. A few weeks later, my doctor said my blood pressure was creeping up. Nothing alarming yet, but enough to mention. He asked about stress, sleep, work hours. I brushed it off, joked about the grind, said it came with the territory. He looked at me for a long second and said something that stuck. This only works if you believe the trade is fair. I laughed it off at the time, paid my copay, went back to work. But that sentence followed me everywhere. Because deep down, I was starting to wonder if I was trading my life for a version of success I never actually chose. And the next thing that happened forced me to answer that question, whether I was ready or not. The moment I realized more money was not improving my life did not come with fireworks or some dramatic breakdown. It came quietly, almost insultingly quiet. I was sitting at my kitchen counter on a Sunday night, laptop open, half-eaten takeout going cold beside me. I had just finished updating a spreadsheet I kept for myself. Not for work, for life. Income, expenses, savings, investments. I had been tracking it for years, telling myself it was responsible, smart, grown up. I stared at the numbers and felt nothing. My income had doubled in 6 years. My lifestyle had inflated just enough to match it. Better place, nicer furniture, higher-end groceries I barely cooked, subscriptions I forgot I had. And yet my stress had tripled. My free time had evaporated. My sense of control had somehow gotten worse. The math stopped making sense. I should have felt proud, secure, relieved. Instead, my chest felt tight, like I was trapped in a deal I could not renegotiate. That was when I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for years. What exactly was I still chasing? Because it was not comfort anymore. I already had that. It was not safety. I had more than enough. It was not even freedom, because my job owned more of me than ever. What I was really chasing was momentum, the appearance of success, the reassurance that I was still moving forward in a way that made other people nod approvingly. That realization scared me more than burnout ever had. A week later, something happened at work that should have excited me. The VP role opened up earlier than expected. People started dropping hints. My name came up in meetings when I was not in the room. The path I had been sprinting towards suddenly cleared. And instead of adrenaline, I felt dread. I started noticing things I had trained myself not to see. How every senior leader looked exhausted in a different way. How nobody over 40 ever talked about hobbies. How vacations were framed as inconveniences. How success at that level came with golden handcuffs and a permanent knot between your shoulders. One night, after a 14-hour day, I sat in my car in the parking garage and did not turn the key. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. I thought about the version of myself 10 years ago. The guy who thought success meant sleeping through the night. Who thought money was a tool, not a scoreboard. Who thought life would eventually slow down once he proved himself. I realized something painful in that car. If I kept going, nobody was going to stop me. There was no natural end point. No moment where someone would tap me on the shoulder and say, "You have done enough. You can rest now." If I wanted balance, I would have to choose it. And choosing it would mean doing something that felt almost illegal in my world. Stopping. Not failing. Not quitting. Not burning out. Stopping on purpose. That thought scared me more than losing my job ever could. Because I knew exactly what would happen next. People would notice. And they would not understand. The decision did not come all at once. It came in pieces. Quiet ones. At first, I stopped volunteering for everything. I let emails sit for an extra hour instead of replying instantly. I left the office while the sun was still up and told myself I did not owe anyone an explanation for that. Nothing exploded. The company did not collapse. Clients did not flee. The world kept turning. That should have comforted me. Instead, it unsettled me. Because if everything still worked without me pushing at maximum speed, what did that say about all the years I sacrificed to prove I was essential? A few weeks later, my manager pulled me aside. Friendly tone. Casual. He said leadership had noticed my consistency. Said I was on track. Asked if I was ready to lean in for the next phase. That phrase, lean in, like I had not already bent my whole life in that direction. I told him something vague, that I was evaluating priorities, that I wanted to make sure the next step aligned with where I was at personally. His smile stayed, but it tightened, just a little. After that conversation, I went home and did something I had not done in years. I wrote down what I actually wanted my days to look like. Not my career arc, not my 5-year plan. My days. I wanted mornings without panic. Evenings where I was not checking my phone every 5 minutes. Weekends that felt like rest instead of recovery. A job that paid enough without demanding everything. Enough. That word felt dangerous. Like admitting it would erase all my credibility. I ran the numbers again. Slowly. Carefully. If I stayed where I was, kept my current role, my current salary, my current pace, I would be fine. More than fine. The future was covered. Retirement was on track. Emergencies were survivable. The only thing at risk was my reputation as the guy who always wanted more. So I made the decision. I told my manager I was not pursuing the VP role. I said it clearly, calmly. No apology. No long justification. He blinked, asked if I was sure. Said opportunities like that do not come twice. I told him I was sure. The silence after that conversation was louder than any argument. Word spread fast. It always does. Suddenly people were checking in on me, asking if everything was okay, hinting that maybe I was burned out, that maybe I needed a break before getting back on track. That was the first twist of the knife. Nobody believed I could want less on purpose. And that was just the beginning. Because the real judgment did not come from work. It came from the people who thought they knew me best. I did not announce my decision. I did not post about it. I did not make some dramatic speech about redefining success. I just stopped climbing. And somehow, that was louder than any promotion I ever took. My mom was the first to notice something was off. She asked why I sounded calmer on the phone, why I was calling at normal hours, why I suddenly had time to come over for dinner on a Wednesday. When I told her I turned down the VP track, the pause on the line was long enough to feel heavy. She did not yell. She did not criticize me outright. She did something worse. She worried. She asked if I was scared, if something happened at work, if I was sick. She reminded me how hard I worked to get where I was, how proud everyone was, how these opportunities do not come around for people like us. People like us. That stung more than I expected. Friends reacted differently. Some joked that I had gone soft, that maybe I was having some early midlife thing. One guy asked if I was secretly planning to quit and move somewhere cheap. Another said, half laughing, that he wished he could afford to stop caring. At work, the tone shifted. People still respected me, but it was quieter, more cautious, like they were not sure what box to put me in anymore. I was no longer the guy sprinting ahead. I was the guy standing still in a race nobody knew how to exit. Then came the first real twist. A recruiter reached out. Bigger firm, bigger money, bigger title. Everything I had chased for years, wrapped up neatly and delivered right to my inbox. Olmi would have jumped, would have polished his resume, practiced his answers, fantasized about the offer. Instead, my stomach dropped. I did the interview anyway. Part of me needed to know if I still could. The call went great. They loved my background. Talked numbers that made my current salary look small. When they asked where I saw myself in 5 years, I hesitated. Not because I did not know the right answer. Because I did not believe it anymore. I declined the next round. That was the moment people started treating my choice like a problem to solve. Advice started pouring in, unasked. Podcasts to listen to. Books about ambition. Articles about staying hungry. People framed my decision as temporary confusion, not a conscious shift. And here is the part nobody warns you about. Even when you know you are doing the right thing, being misunderstood by everyone still hurts. Late at night, I questioned myself. Wondered if I was wasting something. If I would regret this when I was older. If I was letting fear disguise itself as wisdom. Because the truth was, peace did not arrive immediately. It came mixed with doubt, with loneliness, with the uncomfortable realization that stepping off the path meant walking alone for a while. And then something happened that forced me to confront whether I actually trusted my own definition of success. Something I could not ignore. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, right when I was starting to believe the noise around me was dying down. It was my old boss, Rick, the one who hired me straight out of my second promotion. The guy who taught me how to survive boardrooms without flinching. We had not talked in over a year. He did not waste time with small talk. He said his firm was expanding. New division. Big push. He said my name came up more than once. He said they needed someone reliable. Someone proven. Someone who could step in and run things without hand-holding. Then he said the number. I will not repeat it here, but it was the kind of money people dream about when they say things like, just 5 more years, and then I will slow down. I felt the old reflex kick in. That spark. That itch in my chest that said, this is it. This is why you worked so hard. Rick talked about influence, about legacy, about how this was the kind of role that locked in your future. I told him I needed time. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was excited, because I was terrified. That offer was everything I had trained myself to want. And now that it was sitting in my lap, I realized how easy it would be to undo all the clarity I had fought for. I imagined telling people I accepted it. The approval, the relief, the way concern would instantly flip back into pride. I imagined my mom telling her friends again. Imagined work friends nodding like, of course he did. This makes sense. I also imagined the cost. The late nights returning. The constant pressure. The way my phone would never really be silent again. The way stillness would once again feel like a luxury instead of a baseline. I sat at my kitchen table until sunrise, staring at the same wall I had stared at months earlier when the math stopped working. Here is the truth I did not want to admit. Part of me wanted to take the job just to make everyone else comfortable, just to prove I was still ambitious, still impressive, still worthy of respect. That scared me more than any workload ever could. The next morning, I went for a walk without my phone. No music, no podcasts, just me and the sound of the city waking up. I passed people rushing to work, shoulders tight, eyes already tired. I used to be one of them. For the first time, I felt like I was watching my old life from the outside. By noon, Rick texted asking if I had thought about it. I stared at the message for a long time, because whatever I replied would reveal whether my decision to stop was real or just a pause waiting for the next excuse to run again. And I knew that once I answered, there would be no hiding from the consequences. Not from him, not from others, and not from myself. I called Rick back that afternoon. I did not rehearse what I was going to say. I knew if I did, I would talk myself out of it. So I waited until my hands stopped shaking, took a breath, and answered. I told him I appreciated the offer. I told him it meant a lot that he thought of me. I told him the role sounded incredible. Then I told him no. There was a pause. A long one. He asked if I wanted more time. I said no. He asked if the number was the issue. I said no. He asked if I was unhappy where I was. I said no again. I told him something that felt almost embarrassing to admit out loud. I said I was choosing stability over acceleration. I said I was already at enough. Another pause. Shorter this time. He said he respected the honesty, but his tone had shifted. Not angry. Not disappointed. Confused. Like I had just told him gravity was optional. When the call ended, I sat there waiting for regret to crash into me. It did not. What had come was something else. Fear. Real fear. The kind that creeps in when you realize you just stepped off a moving platform and there is no clear map for where you are standing now. Within days, people found out. Rick mentioned it to someone. Someone mentioned it to someone else. Suddenly my phone lit up again. Old coworkers, mentors, friends of friends. Everyone wanted to understand. Some tried to be supportive but missed the mark. They said things like, it is good you know your limits. Or you can always jump back in later. As if this was some temporary weakness I needed to recover from. Others were less gentle. They framed my decision as fear, as burnout, as wasted potential. One guy actually laughed and said, must be nice to quit the race when you are ahead. That one stuck with me, because it made me realize something uncomfortable. A lot of people do not want you to be happy. They want you to validate the sacrifices they are making. If I could stop chasing more and be okay, what did that say about the hours they were still giving away? About the relationships they were neglecting? About the finish line they kept promising themselves they would reach someday? My choice made people defensive, and that defensiveness turned into judgment. At work, leadership adjusted their expectations of me. Not officially, just quietly. I was no longer included in certain conversations. No longer in the mix. It was subtle, but I felt it. I told myself I was fine with that. Most days I was. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the noise of other people's opinions finally faded, doubt crept back in. I wondered if I had misunderstood myself. If I had confused peace with avoidance. If I would wake up one day and realize I had stepped off the wrong path. Then came the twist I never saw coming. A restructuring announcement landed in my inbox one Monday morning. And suddenly, standing still did not feel safe anymore. The email hit my inbox at 8:12 in the morning. Subject line, organizational update. That was all it said. Neutral. Clean. The kind of phrase that looks harmless until you have been around long enough to know better. I opened it while standing in my kitchen, coffee still too hot to drink. Halfway through the second paragraph, my stomach dropped. Restructuring. Streamlining. Strategic realignment. All the usual words that mean the same thing. Cuts were coming. Not immediately. Not recklessly. But soon. And not randomly either. They were focusing on growth-critical roles. Forward momentum. Expansion paths. High-trajectory leadership tracks. Everything I had just stepped away from. For the first time since I made my decision, fear hit me hard enough to knock the wind out of my chest. Not panic. Not regret. Something colder. Vulnerability. I realized something in that moment that nobody talks about when they romanticize slowing down. Choosing sufficiency in a system built on acceleration makes you expendable. I spent that day pretending to work while my brain ran in circles. Every doubt I had fought off came rushing back. Was I being naive? Was this what everyone had been trying to warn me about? Had I mistaken peace for safety? People started whispering. You could feel it in meetings. The tone shifted. Conversations happened without me again, but this time they felt heavier. A coworker I trusted pulled me aside and said leadership was reassessing long-term placements. He did not say my name, but he did not have to. His eyes said it for him. That night, I went home and stared at my ceiling for hours. Here was the twist nobody prepares you for. When you stop chasing more, you also stop being protected by momentum. Momentum forgives a lot. It hides inefficiencies. It excuses absence. It makes people overlook exhaustion and imbalance because you are still on the rise. Stillness offers no such shield. For the first time, I seriously considered reversing course. Reaching out. Signaling ambition again. Letting people know I was still hungry. I even drafted an email. Just a few sentences. Enough to reopen doors. I did not send it. Instead, I asked myself the hardest question yet. If everything I feared came true, if I lost this job, if the safety I built cracked, would I still believe in the choice I made? That was the night I realized my decision had never been about comfort. It was about trust. Trusting that my life did not need to be optimized at all costs. Trusting that I could adapt without betraying myself. Trusting that success was not something I had to constantly outrun losing. But belief is easy when it is theoretical. The real test came faster than I expected. Because 2 weeks later, I got called into a meeting I was not supposed to be in. And what they offered me next forced everything into the open. The meeting invite popped up with no context. Just a calendar block and 3 names attached. HR. My director. Someone from strategy one barely knew. No subject line. That is how you know it matters. I walked into the conference room expecting the worst. I had already rehearsed calm responses in my head. Already pictured myself nodding, thanking them for the opportunity, pretending I was not rattled. But that is not what happened. They did not lay me off. They did not demote me. Instead, they offered me a choice. They said the company was restructuring leadership pathways. That my experience was valuable. That my past trajectory made me a strong candidate for a specialized growth role. Different title, different scope, still upward, still demanding, still fast, more money, more visibility, more responsibility. But then they said the other option. I could stay exactly where I was. Same role, same pay, same team, no upward path, no leadership track, no expectation of more. They framed it like generosity, like flexibility, like they were doing me a favor. But I heard the subtext. Pick acceleration or accept irrelevance. They did not say it that way, but it was there, hanging in the air between us. I asked a simple question, one that surprised even me. I asked what staying would mean long-term. The strategy guy hesitated. HR glanced down. My director cleared his throat. They said staying would mean stability, but limited future consideration. That growth resources would be allocated elsewhere. That it was important for people to remain aligned with company momentum. There it was again. Momentum. I walked out of that meeting with a week to decide. That week was hell. Every doubt returned, louder than before. I imagined explaining to people why I plateaued. I imagined being quietly pushed out years later. I imagined regret showing up when I was older, whispering that I should have taken the shot when it was offered. I also imagined the alternative. The emails creeping back into my nights. The tension returning to my shoulders. The quiet resentment of trading my life for a ladder I already knew did not end. Here is the part that surprised me most. The fear was not about money. It was about identity. If I did not keep climbing, who was I? For years, my value had been measured in progress, in titles, in trajectory. And what came next? Standing still forced me to answer a question I had avoided my entire adult life. If nobody was watching, if nobody was impressed, if nobody approved, what kind of life did I actually want to live? I took a day off. No meetings. No email. I went to a park near my place and sat on a bench like I had nowhere else to be. And for the first time in years, I felt something solid underneath all the noise. Clarity. I realized something that made my chest ache in a good way. I was done outsourcing my definition of success. The decision was already made. I just had to say it out loud. And once I did, there would be no suspense left. Only truth. I sent my answer on Friday morning. No drama. No manifesto. Just a short email thanking them for the options and confirming I was choosing to stay where I was. Same role. Same scope. Same expectations. I read it 3 times before hitting send. My finger hovered longer than I want to admit. Then it was done. The reply came fast. Polite. Professional. Carefully neutral. They acknowledged my decision and said they appreciated my transparency. No congratulations. No reassurance. Just confirmation. And that was it. The suspense I had been living inside for months evaporated in an instant. Not replaced with joy. Not replaced with regret. Replaced with calm. The weeks that followed were strange. People treated me differently, but not in a dramatic way. It was subtle. Conversations shifted. Assumptions changed. I was no longer the guy everyone expected to rise. I was the guy who opted out. Some colleagues avoided the topic entirely. Others could not help themselves. They asked if I was sure. If I worried about stagnation. If I had a backup plan. I stopped explaining. Because here is the truth nobody tells you. When you choose sufficiency in a culture addicted to growth, no explanation will ever feel like enough to people who are still chasing. My mom eventually stopped worrying. Not because she understood, but because she saw the change in me. I sounded lighter. I slept better. I showed up. I laughed more easily. That mattered more than any title. Friends adjusted too. Some drifted. A few admitted they envied the choice, but could not imagine making it themselves. One said my decision made him uncomfortable because it forced him to question his own. That told me everything I needed to know. The biggest surprise was what happened inside me. The anxiety did not vanish overnight, but it softened. I stopped waking up braced for impact. I started cooking again. I joined a gym not to optimize anything, just to move. I took vacations without checking email. Real vacations. I realized how much of my life I had been postponing in the name of later. Later is a lie ambition tells you to keep you running. I did not become lazy. I did not lose purpose. I did not waste my potential. I redirected it. Here is the final truth, the one that took me nearly 4 decades to understand. Success is not universal. It is not scalable. It is not something other people get to define for you just because they are louder. For me, success became this. Having enough money to live without fear, enough time to live without regret, and enough self-respect to stop proving something that was never broken. I did not fail. I stopped. And choosing enough, in a world that always wants more, was the most deliberate act of defiance I have ever made. That is the part people judged. That is the part one finally understand. And that is the part one would choose again.